Welcome back to What Would You Ask podcast. I'm excited to have my next guest. And I was just talking to Tiffany off camera, and she said, why am I in first season and I'm your 70th guest? And I'm like, wow, that is so true. And then, Omar asked why he was 64 and he was in the same season, same episode. So it's unbelievable. I don't know what we're doing. I am excited to welcome this guest to the program. She is, and get ready, folks. I mean, sit down because she first invented Ava the Elephant. You remember that kind of, as my wife said, just eases the stress and anxiety on children. It's that medicine dropper shaped as an elephant, nice, cute Ava. And it's for children, right? To give them the medicine, make it go smoother. They don't have to go crazy. It was a wrestling match. The few times I did it with any of my 4 kids, it was like, I got it in, and it would be in his nose and sometimes ear. I don't know how, went. And I would go, it's out. I think he'll be fine. Yeah, okay. But his fever's still going. Anyway, the medicine never got in there. She also appeared on Shark Tank, season 1, as I said, episode 1. She's an inventor. She's a motivational speaker. For some reason, she got into this podcast business, but she's doing really well with that too. And she's a mom of 3. She's got a lot of things going on. I'm excited to welcome her to the program. Tiffany Krumins, welcome to What Would You Ask podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
I'm excited to have you here. And I really want to, one of the things that I've learned through interviewing 70 entrepreneurs is the stories that they have. I was talking with Kelsey from Doped last week, or maybe the week before, and she talked about the mission that she was on to create. I mean, she has Cookie Dough, a company that's about cookie dough, right? But it's what she loved to do, and she had a job at Intel and spent 10 years there, and it brought her to all this craziness of alcohol, and she just had to get back to her center, she talks about, and what she loved to do is to cook and bake, and that brought her back through her therapy. And it's and now she's doing great things for the business, and she's doing great things for people in recovery and all of that stuff. Similarly, you've answered the bell again, right? People designing, creating things that reduce anxiety for children. I remember having to do, as I said in the intro, it was tough. And I only did it, a handful of times. I have 4 kids. It's embarrassing. But tell us the story that helped you create Ava the Elephant.
I want to start by saying I have to be honest. I was in my happy place. I worked as a special needs caregiver. And so I watched children who had special needs on a daily basis. And I got to experience what they went through, the challenges they faced, and medication was one of them. And so when I went into business, I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I left something that I loved, and I went into something that I knew nothing about besides watching my dad build his business growing up. Little did I know I was going to be a successful entrepreneur, but it was brutal for the first, I'd say 8 years. I mean, literally the first 8 years were rough because it was me and it was only me. Yes, I had an investor from the show, Barbara Corcoran, but she was an investor. So I had to do the day in and the day out of it, and the figuring out of every part of this industry I knew nothing about. And the biggest part of that was manufacturing, making a product from scratch, and not just the prototyping, but what type of manufacturing would I use? And so unlike some where they leave, like she did, where they leave the corporate world or somewhere where they're unhappy and go into what they love, which is entrepreneurship, I kind of did the opposite. I went from what I really loved and what fed my soul into something that was completely foreign to me and was very difficult for the first, almost decade. But the reason I came up with it was exactly that. I came up with Ava because I was working with a little boy named Gibby. Gibby had a very hard time taking medication. I had a light bulb moment one night where I said, look, I've had great success with these animals that I used to incorporate to cut his hair, of all things. And it worked. I created Ava. I took it in. I said, this is your little friend. She's going to give you medicine. And it was like a light bulb went off in his little head. He went from hating it and having to be restrained to take things like Tylenol, just simple medications, to, oh, this no longer looks offensive to me. This no longer looks scary. I'm fine. Let me take it.
That's so cool. That is so cool. So take us from that moment to the business, how that's, kind of starts out. People, I'm sure, said, hey, that's a great idea. And then you passed it on, you made some. And I mean, you came into the tank with a prototype. So you were really early on. I mean, some of the criticism, we'll get to this, with the tanks was, the old adage that they use even today is it's a product, it's not a business. Well, you proved that wrong. But Take us to the journey that brought you from a product into, I'm going to apply this thing to Shark Tank and take this, worldwide.
So at first, I used the product on him for about 3 or 4 months, and the more I used it, the more I thought, maybe this should be a product for multiple, for kids all over the world. But I had no idea how to get there, and so I started reading all the books on inventing and researching all that I could. I actually submitted to a Halloween costume contest. We needed the funding to do a patent and do a patent search. And so I created sewed an entire costume to turn my husband into Frankenstein. He's a big Russian with a square face, and he's huge already. So I basically turned him into Frankenstein, and we won $5,000, the first place in that competition. And we used that money to do our patent search on Ava. And so that was kind of the launching point of, okay, I'm going to commit. I'm going to put some skin in the game. I'm going to take this money that we could use for a vacation or whatever, and I'm going to put it into this product. And when I found out nothing like it existed, and that search was positive, that really pushed me forward into doing some more research and learning more about it. That's about as far as I went before I saw the casting for Shark Tank. And so I tried out for the show, very naively thinking, I'll get an investor, the product will be everywhere, that'll be it, just much like most of the people watching the show think. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Didn't really even think about the fact that I was starting a business, if I'm completely honest. I just wanted to see this product in the hands of kids all over the world. And so I tried out for the show. I heard back the same day because this was the pilot episode. It didn't have a name. I didn't know who the investors were. It was just a big secret at that point. And went out, filmed on the show, got the investment, and came home. And that's where the real nitty gritty started. That's where I had to learn this entire process, start to finish. And it was about an 8-month process until my product was fully developed and ready to air on the show.
So how long was it to your audition or you're on at the studio to airing time? Was it 8 months? Was it that long?
Yep, it was 8 months. So
jeez.
Because it was the pilot episode.
Yeah.
Now everything very quickly. They're filming in the summer. It's airing in the fall. So that's why you don't see. A lot of people wonder, why don't you see new inventions anymore? That's why, because the timeline is very short.
So when you're coming into the tank, how are you? Let me give you what my perspective was, and I've only watched the episode maybe 15 times in the last 36 hours, just because I want to be, prepped for this. And
right.
You look nervous. You also look professional. You looked confident even through the nervousness. Like there was a part of you when you're walking in where your gait or your strut was really like you were walking in. There was no like kind of whimpering. You were walking in with shoulders back. And I thought your face at some points with some of the interactions. And by the way, we're seeing an edited version of what we hear this all the time. We're not seeing the back and forth and crosstalk that's going on and questions getting fired. We just see this nice question at a time. Your face looked like you're a little bit overwhelmed in some cases, which I imagine you were, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, the most overwhelming part, most people don't know this, is when you first walk in. Mind you, okay, I don't know what this show looks like. I don't know what the set looks like. I don't know anything. So they opened the elevator. At the time, it was a fake elevator.
That's right.
Doors, and I walk down this hallway. Tell me, you're going to see an X on the floor. Stand on the X and don't start your pitch until we give you the cue. And so I had to stand there for close to 5 minutes.
Wow.
These investors who I've never met, who I know nothing about, and not break and not freak out and not let my knees shake, and not start my pitch either until they gave me the cue, because they were basically they get all the cameras ready, all the sound ready. And again, it was in the beginning, so they were working out all the kinks. But yeah, I was a nervous wreck. But at the same time, I was very, very, very confident in what I created. I was confident because I had seen it in the best case scenario. I'd seen it with a little boy that I knew like my own. This is before I had children of my own. And Gibby was like family to me. And I knew if I had created something that was such a big solution for him, for a real problem that he had, that I could be confident in that. You know what I mean? I couldn't be confident in anything else in business or what would happen after. But listen, I created something that's solid.
I think your story attached to your personal authenticity went a long way. I think you not coming out to say that you knew lifetime value of your product or the cost of acquisition or, You weren't asking for $200,000 for 4% or something ridiculous. I
Right.
think that you just said, look, this is my story. It worked for many months on this child that would have very difficult time taking it. I've done the patent search. There's nothing
Mhm.
out there like it. And I think your two main goals, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tiffany, but it was making sure that with the money, we secure the patent. That's got to get locked down. And the other thing was to get the prototype, right? A working prototype.
Yeah. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time. When I said make a prototype, it was like, I didn't know what that would cost or that I should work with an engineer. I was so green, but I knew that that was about all I could afford. Just knowing enough about business through watching my dad build his own. I knew I wasn't going to get very far with that 50 grand, but that's what I wanted to ask for so that I got the number, because at that time, I don't know if this is still the rule for Shark Tank, but you had to get what you were asking for. So they
Right.
couldn't negotiate down. I think that is still the case.
It is. Yeah.
Kind of blank that, but yeah. So I had to go kind of low to make sure that I was actually going to get an investment of some kind.
Mark from Baton Rouge wants to know, did you have a specific shark in mind? I think it's a little early for her to have one in mind because she didn't even know who they were. But let's ask a follow-up to that, because I get your question, Mark. When you started talking to the sharks, did you gravitate towards someone? Was Barbara the one you gravitated? Was it Robert, Kevin? Tell us a little bit about that.
Towards Barbara because she was a female, and not because of woman power or I hate men or any of that. It was just that I knew she knew what was involved in giving kids medication, and it ended up being the case. Sure enough, I had 4 men who are wealthy, well-established men who likely have nannies. If they don't have a nanny, their wife is probably more involved. With their children at home while they're working. So, that's kind of common sense. And I had a feeling that Barbara would be the only one that really understood and remembered what that challenge was like when her kids were little.
A lot of the a lot of the sharks, I should say, seem to think you don't need an investment. I remember Robert saying that. I think Kevin was, it's an idea, not necessarily a business yet, and you're early. But he even said, or I know Damon said it too. He was like, I don't know if you need us. Like, you kind of doing the right things. And what did that concern you as far as getting that deal? Were you thinking, oh no, they're going to push me out here, saying go keep working hard, and that's not what you want?
As they went, because that's what happened. They went down the line and basically said, I felt like those were excuses. Again, I knew nothing about this business yet. And when I look back, everything they said was spot on. Everything. Saying that it was only a product, not a business. They were correct. It wasn't even a brand at that point that people now know. So yeah, I agree with them now in hindsight, but when I was standing there, I thought, oh boy, here we go. They're going to let me down one by one. And as we got to Barbara and she was last, thankfully she took a chance on me. What was so incredible about Barbara was that she saw herself in me, and she had no idea who I was. So all she had seen was this quick pitch, this 3.5-minute pitch. That was it. She didn't work with kids with special needs. She didn't do all the things that I do in that space, but she knew that we were like kindred spirits. It was crazy. And sure enough, we were. We both struggled in school. Both of us switched jobs many, many, many times over. There were so many similarities as I got to know her after as an actual friend that just blew my mind. And she knew that. She felt that when she met me there on set, and we hugged and we said, she said that girl is going to succeed. And it was like she knew it in her gut.
So you walk away with a deal with Barbara. You had to give up a lot for that, but it seemed like you were resigned to say, you know what, to get this to the next level, I need to get the deal. So it's kind of giving up, the business is better than just walking out of here with no deal, right?
I may not have been a businesswoman, but I was smart enough to know that I came in with 5 clay homemade baked elephants. That's what I was giving up. And people ask me that question all the time. For 10 years straight, I've heard that question, probably more than anything. How could you give up so much of your business? I'm like, I don't have a business. I didn't have I had 5 clay elephants and a patent search, So she was the one, smart enough to know that she was the one risking everything. And she ended up risking way more than 50 grand. It was, hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment. And so that was a good move, being humble enough. And if anything, I look back, she probably should have gotten more, knowing what we went through afterwards,
So the viewers and listeners love to hear about the due diligence process. How would you sum that up, right? You walk out of the tank, you've got to be ecstatic. So, after you're done with a big dinner and cracking champagne and all, celebrating your success, when the work starts, because you think you walk out of there with a deal, and now the real work starts, right? First, the company's got to do all the due diligence, and then, but the first question everybody asks, and I can't attribute this to anybody because so many people ask it, is when is the first time you talked to Barbara back then in season 1, episode 1? Does she talk to you the next day, the next week, the next month? Tell us about that.
Okay, so my story is completely different again because I was that first episode. I wasn't even the first season. I was the pilot. So
right. That's right.
With 2 entrepreneurs, I think, that she invested in, that she agreed to invest in. So we were in contact right away. I mean, this was totally different than it is now. It's some of these people are a year in due diligence now, trying to get through, figuring out if what they on the show is legit and, did they have the sales that they say they had? And, there's so much to dig through in some of these especially these businesses with millions of dollars in sales. Some of these are big companies that they're having to go through and really find out, is this an investment I want to make in a larger investment? With me, it was the pilot episode. They allowed us to connect right away. She and I did our due diligence. I did it with her, smaller team at the time. And then we just we dove right in and started developing the product, or I did, I should say.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. So the product gets developed, you get it out there, and all of a sudden I'm hearing things and reading things about 10,000 retail stores and different languages. How does this, just tell us how does it blow up like that? I mean,
well, Shark Tank is how it blows up like that. I mean,
yeah.
quite the show it's insane the amount of exposure it brings to products and businesses. What happened is and it's happened for 10 years straight. So I'm 11 now years after my first episode. And quite literally every single day, I will receive an email from someone going, "Congratulations on your deal." Because just seen it in a different country for the first time. And so that's what happens is it continues to not just re-air here in the States on ABC and CNBC, but it also airs all over the world. I just did one of these, a live Instagram with, was it South Africa? A whole different country. And India. I did one with India. And so it was the network that airs Shark Tank in India. And so, but everything they asked me was very new. Like the show happened yesterday, and little did they know I had a decade-long business. So I can't remember where we were even going with that question.
Did you have it? Well, we're kind of talking about the Shark Tank effect, right? When you get to airing night, do they even know that there's a Shark? I mean, imagine there's some, but now it's prep your servers and get it on, Spotify, and because it's going to blow up, right? What was your effect like in that early in a pilot stage?
It was smaller for the first episode, obviously, because it's the first episode. But what happened was I developed this strong relationship with ABC from being on that pilot episode. So remember, they were the ones that the big people at ABC sat at this desk and said, "Do we want to buy this show?" They watched the pilot. And so my story was one that they fell in love with, along with the other people on that pilot episode. And so I've remained close to the network and those people that made those initial decisions. And so I filmed 4 different updates with Shark Tank. And so not just as my first episode re-air, but all of those updates keep re-airing. And so the exposure has just continued. And it's sadly, that's what a lot of people do now is they go on the show for exposure because they know they're going to be in every household very quickly and everybody's going to know about them.
One of the updates I saw was talking about Ava 2.0 and this beautiful, sweet voice of this song that just played. Tell us the story behind that.
So when I was starting this out and developing Ava, I went to Barbara because, again, I was very green, not knowing what the next steps were. And I said, what is this called? We have to get a sound bite or something for the factory, an MP3. Who are these people we hire to do the voice for the product? And she said, "Are you crazy?" Because Barbara's frugal. She's a smart businesswoman for a reason. And she said, "What are you, crazy? You did the sound on the ones that you brought into Shark Tank. You need to do the voice." And so I borrowed a studio from a radio friend here in Atlanta, went in for literally 2 minutes, plugged my nose, recorded first thing of 1, 2, 3, open wide. And I had to listen to that for the first 8 years of Ava being on the market, whether a child was pushing it for me or I was pushing it at a trade show or my kids were playing it. It was going through my head. And so Ava 2.0, which was part of the licensing deal I did with Baby Delight, was my oldest daughter's voice. She sang a sweet new little jingle that is more like a song about taking medication. And so, yeah, I enjoy it now because now it's her voice instead of mine.
That's cool. Did you work out a contract with her and she gets residuals now for the voiceover work?
I'm like, and sleep in our home. So
There you go. You'll keep feeding her for that. That's awesome. So what's going on with you today? I know the Mom Genius I've read about, and tell everybody about that.
So when I licensed Ava, we came to a point about 8 years in where Ava was still a single product. Yes, she had multiple languages and multiple countries, but it was a single product, and a single SKU can't survive forever like that. And even though she was continuing to do well, there was a turning point of, look, are we going to turn this into a full brand? Like a lot of the different brands, Gerber, and you see a ton of different Gerber bottles and different variations, or are we going to license the product or sell the company? And so Barbara and I decided at that point to license the product. We pursued licensing. We had discussions with big companies like Disney, and those were very lengthy. And so I ended up finding one that went a little more smoothly and more quickly. And it was a company called Baby Delight. And it was a very good partnership. It wasn't a partnership. It was a licensing agreement. And so I essentially, for those that don't know what licensing is, I took my IP, my patent and my trademark, and I lent it to another company for a certain amount of time. And that was a 3-year period. And so 3 years ago, almost to the month, I licensed Ava to Baby Delight, and they helped me redesign her. They had been developing products for many years. I said that the only way I wanted to license it is if it could be redesigned the way that I wanted it to, my kind of dream design for Ava. And so they did that and did it really well. And then they took over basically Ava. And so I was able to breathe for the first time in 8 years. It was like, oh, I'm not everything. I'm not fulfillment. I'm not, accounting and secretary and you name it. And so I licensed Ava off to them. And it gave me my creativity back. And so I'm sitting here going, oh, wow, what do I want to do with life, basically? And I started creating products again. I met my business partner for Mom Genius here in Atlanta, and he and I launched this company with the intentions of helping other inventors the way that I had been helped along the way, and developing more products, because that's my sweet spot, is creating new products. And so that's what we did. I also do a podcast, like you said, and the podcast really wasn't to make money. It wasn't to do anything but help people, because I heard so many of the same questions for 10 years straight. Everybody reach out and they gave you that generic question of, I have an idea, what do I do? And I discovered over those 10 years that I could never answer that question quickly or efficiently for anyone. Sorry about that. Did I lose you for a second?
No, you're good.
I couldn't answer the question. Every product was different. And so no matter what type of, they offered to pay consulting money, I'll pay you per hour. And it was like, you couldn't pay me enough hours for me to teach you really what you need to do start to finish. And so I started doing this podcast so we could talk about the different topics, the times that Barbara and I didn't know what FOB China meant, and, all of these different terms you're going to hear, and how to manufacture, and just all of that. And so that's what we do on the podcast. It's called Product Genius, and it's just a free podcast that people can tune in, listen to different topics on product development.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Sounds like a book could be in the works too. I mean, why do you have all that knowledge and all that? I mean, I'm sure you've thought about that. I'm not trying to give you like it's my idea and want a percentage or anything.
I'm like, no, about a book.
So let's go back to Shark Tank in the final minutes. I just want to get really want to understand, was there anything anecdotal that was funny? Anything that any experiences were memorable? Tell us a little bit about that first pilot episode.
One of them was the fact that one that really stuck out to me was the fact that Mark Burnett, which is the executive producer for Shark Tank, for Survivor, for all these shows, I found out later that he was in my corner and really pushing for me to succeed and to be on the show, because he was a nanny. When he came here to the States from overseas, he worked as a nanny. And so he related to my job of being a nanny and really could relate to probably giving medication to children. And so he kind of pushed for me and rooted for me. And that always just touched my heart, because it was like, okay, if that wasn't meant to be, I don't know what is.
That is a great story. That's so cool. I mean, I've seen Mark, listen to him, read about him and to hear that he was a nanny. And
Yeah.
makes sense, though. I mean, makes sense that why he would pull for you. Tell us about the relationship you've had with Barbara, and I'm sure it's still going on today, but tell us a little bit about it.
So Barbara and I, we grew very close during that time. One of the reasons was that right after I filmed Shark Tank, I went home, I dove into what I was supposed to be doing for product development, and I was diagnosed with cancer. So I was 27 years old. I had a small baby at home. My first baby was born right around the time that I did Shark Tank. And so it was a battle for me to decide, could I continue with building this business? And she really, really was a big inspiration to me through that and helped me as a mentor. And we grew much closer, I think, than maybe what she's able to do now with all of her investments, because again, it was just me and one other, I think Todd's Pie company, only other investment from that first episode. So we had that 8 months to get to know each other before Shark Tank ever aired, before anybody knew what it was, the name was. And then, of course, we continued to grow that relationship. Now, was it difficult at times? Of course. I mean, she did not expect to spend what she spent bringing this little elephant to market. I didn't know what we were going to spend. Ended up being considered a medical device. So we had to register it with the FDA. And it was just like all of these unexpected hurdles that we faced. Some people with bad intentions tried to come into the picture at one point, and that ended up being kind of a legal battle. And so it's been bumpy, but she's someone who is so near and dear to me, and I think she feels the same way about me.
Well, listen, we are excited that you joined us. We appreciate your time. And listen, folks, we're talking about one of the biggest success stories in Shark Tank history. I mean, this is definitely one of those. And it was right from the beginning. I mean, it was the pilot episode is now, and I know the Scrub Daddy and some things that have blown it out since then. But think about, no one even knew who Barbara Corcoran was. No one even knew what Shark Tank was. It was that whatever thing that Kevin Red Dragons or whatever that show was back then, right? But in that 8 months, while they're trying to build this business, no, there is no Shark Tank. There is no Barbara Corcoran for most of the world, right? And this ended up being one of the biggest success stories. I think it's such a fantastic story. And not that somebody creating a T-shirt or a shoe isn't meaningful, because they all help. But this is really helpful. And anything around kids, you know how that goes, right? It just softens it.
What sticks out to people, and it should matter to them, is that I had no intentions of creating a product. This was not a product to me. This was a real life solution for a little boy that I loved. And so if you can find those things in your life, if you have a trade, if you are a tradesman, I tell people all the time, I went fly fishing one day and was with the fly fishing coach, or not coach, but whatever he's called, guide. And he was biting off his wire, and I was like, gosh, isn't there a better way to do that? And he was thinking of we were talking about all these inventions he had come up with. And so I'm always encouraging people to look at your current trade. Don't try to reach outside the box and do crazy stuff. Do exactly what you do every day. Find out what the problems are and solve it.
Yeah, that makes sense. No doubt about it. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We wish you the best of luck with Mom Genius and everything else you do, and the podcast and the book and all that stuff. I can write the forward for you if I have to. I'll do it.
Okay.
But I appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, guys.
We'll be back with more What Would You Ask podcast in a second.